Hey guys, you're listening to Totally Stoked Podcast with Amelia Travis, yoga teacher and wild child turned multi-six-figure business coach, writer, speaker, and spiritual warrior. Totally Stoked is an experiment in radical honesty. On this show, there's only two rules: show up and tell the truth. Each week, we share uncensored, truth-telling, shame-busting conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, visionaries, and modern-day mystics, revealing their rise to thrive stories, current challenges, and sharing their most powerful tools for awakening, growth, and well-being. This is your place to let down your guard, open your heart, and remember that being human is a crazy, wild ride, but you don't have to do it alone. So buckle up, baby, because we're heading full speed ahead to radical self-love and a totally stoked life. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Totally Stoked Podcast. I am super, super stoked to be here today with a special guest who arrived, as they always do, right on time. She's someone who had been mentioned to me many times over the last year by different friends and allies, and yet I hadn't taken the hint from the universe to go out and find her until she arrived in my inbox. And I thought, aha, there's going to be a really, really powerful conversation that unfolds from this. So my guest today is a shamanic practitioner and founder of Ceremonie, an esoteric brand which focuses on in-person and online shamanic education, remote shamanic readings, and plant medicines for skin and aura. She works with a blend of modalities, including core shamanism, plant spirit medicine, chaos magic, and Chinese esoterics, with a focus on integrating the subconscious and the conscious, past lives work, divination, dream work, ancestral connection, and consciousness expansion. In other words, all my faves. She's also a neurofeedback practitioner at Open Minds Performance, where she supports others in accessing their peak via neurological resilience. It's the intersection of ancient and frontier that she finds most fascinating, and that I'm fascinated with in talking with her. And she believes that this intersection is so powerful and effective for reaching the full human potential. This powerful magical creature became a shamanic practitioner by accident while on bed rest for 5 months during her second child's pregnancy. Having an A-linear background in design, education, and clean tech, she sees her background as a way to relate, be curious together, and to live our most aligned selves. She's shifting the paradigm and the conversation nationally, globally, about what it means to embrace meaningful magic on our own terms. And I'm so excited to welcome to the show, Mimi Young. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So you didn't know that little bit of backstory that I had multiple people in my circle. So, hey, do you know Mimi Young, or have you heard of Ceremonie over the last year? And I was like, no, I haven't heard of her, and kind of just breezed it past. And then you dropped into either my inbox or my assistant's inbox with like, hey, I'd love to be on the show. And I was like, oh, great. I guess I really am supposed to talk to her. And I was like, thank you, universe, for making it very easy. It's like, oh, you're going to ignore the signs. We'll just put her right in front of you. And I was like, oh, perfect.
This is so awesome to hear.
So you are Taiwanese Canadian, a shamanic practitioner, and Ceremonie, it has a lot of different offerings underneath it. And maybe part of the reason that I initially had glossed over is I took a quick glance at your Instagram and I thought, oh, okay, this is like beauty and skincare stuff. And I was like, okay, great. But in that moment, I wasn't looking to buy any beauty or skincare stuff. So I just kind of passed it by. But what I know now is you do so much more than that. So can you share with us a little bit about what is Ceremonie as a brand and why did you start it?
So like what you had shared with your listeners, I did it all by accident. And, looking back, I think I can only say that spirit told me to do it. And I foolishly, whatever you want to call it, I followed. It was sort of like yeah, the circumstance presented, with Ceremonie, when I first started, my second child was just born. So I was, slightly sleep deprived and anxious to be back on my feet because I had been on bed rest for so long. And I was experiencing psychic downloads on the daily. And it was just this whole new accelerated pace. And I want to preface that that wasn't the first time I experienced the paranormal. I would say that I've been experiencing it since childhood, but the format of the experience changed while on bed rest. And then, of course, that led me to start working with plant medicine. I needed something that was very tactile and three-dimensional, and something, even on a practical perspective, that helped my body feel in my body again, just because so much of that had, like, there was this pause during that 5-month bed rest where I literally had to shrink my world, shrink my experiences in the three-dimensional, and just essentially be like baking this bun in the oven to sustain the viability of his life. And then so when he was born, and after he was born, I had just this huge surge of wanting to be in connection again. And for me, it was through the plants.
Mm-hmm. I'm so curious, do you think that part of the reason that the bed rest was really expansive in terms of your awareness of these downloads was because you were forced into that state of being as opposed to doing?
Oh, absolutely. I think, prior to that, I was like a closet intuitive. It wasn't something that I was comfortable talking about with others, let alone with, I couldn't even talk about it with myself. It was just something that I avoided. There was a lot of confusion and shame around it. And part of it was because I would say one of my first gifts is something called clarifaction or clarifactance, commonly known as psychic smelling. And we're to talk about the clairs, that the other psychic gifts, such as clairvoyance or clairaudience. Those are fairly talked about within the New Age, or wellness group or industry. But what I was experiencing was quite unique, and I would say that it was overlooked. And so I would go to metaphysical bookstores and try to get some information. And typically people would say, oh yeah, well this is our section about the clairs, but no, I don't see anything about this specific gift. And so because of it, I being a witch in many ways is already something that one has to be able to be okay with. And then two, when I was experiencing this, since adolescence onwards, it was something that I had to be comfortable with myself, realizing that I had a gift that is still dissimilar in some ways to other intuitives. So I lacked the language to be able to talk about it. And I feel for me, language is a way to normalize. When we have words to express things, when we have a way to communicate with others and to create that commonality, for me, it was I didn't feel normal. And so there was a lot of shame around it.
So this is really interesting. So a couple things I'd like to ask you about in there. One is, because I know the question is burning in the minds of so many people listening right now, can you describe to us the experience of this clair? What actually happens, and perhaps if there's one memorable experience of it that where you really were like, this is outside the realm of like what's going on in my sensory perceptions of the here and now. This is something else. Can you share with us what it feels like?
Yeah, so psychic smelling is smelling something that cannot be pinpointed in the three-dimensional. So you're smelling something and it feels like you're smelling a real thing, Let's say, you go to a coffee shop, you'll smell coffee.
Mm-hmm.
But I would be smelling coffee, let's say, in the forest,
Mm-hmm.
or in a place where you do not expect that thing to be, because it's not physically there.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, examples, it started off as smelling people. So I would pick up the scent of someone, and that person wouldn't be physically with me, and their clothing wouldn't be with me, or there's nothing physically that belongs to that individual, and yet I would just get this whiff, a very powerful whiff of an individual. And it really, for me, it was typically, at least in my younger years, it was smelling someone and then being able to make sense of, well, why did I just smell that person? So sometimes it would be like, maybe it would be good to just give them a call and see how they're doing. And then later on, I would find out that, they like had a horrible day, or they had a terrible migraine, or something shocking had happened to them. They lost their job, or, their cat passed away, that type of thing. And they would always say, how did you know? Like, how did you know to call me? This is, before texting days, because I'm like an 80s kid. That's that's typically how it would present. And then later on, as the gift developed, I would smell emotions. So I'd learn to smell, I would smell envy in someone, or smell dishonesty. Typically, they would be construed as warnings. Like, they're not, I don't want to say that those emotions are negative, because they're not, but they would be typically warnings for me to pay attention. But I'm saying this because I have, years and years of experience now, where I've made tons of mistakes, where I have ignored it, or I made I arrived at the wrong conclusion, and I had thought it meant something else. But yeah, that's typically how it is experienced for me.
It's just my own curiosity. When you smell something like dishonesty or envy, is that an intuitive knowing, and it's like person specific? Or, for example, does, dishonesty smell like, cloves and something else?
Like rotten eggs or something
across the board.
I would say those types of emotions, like greed, dishonesty, gossip, those types of ones, they can either smell like a person, and that person may have a history of that, just from me being, like knowing this individual, and then it shows up as a person, and then I have to ask myself, is that smell that individual, or is it the energy that I'm smelling? So not actually the individual. It's not Susie's per se. It might just be the emotion. But sometimes it could smell more like an unpleasant smell. Typically, sort of like a rotting sort of smell, like something that has decomposed. It's not a pleasant flower fragrance, let's say. And I do smell, flowers and things like that too. I think for me, the ones that I smell the most are people that I actually know, and flowers, which, because I have a relationship with them as teachers, I understand, okay, if I'm smelling this, I'm smelling rose, let's say, this is I'm needing to really ask myself, where do I need to offer compassion about the situation, and perhaps forgiveness? Typically, it's how I interpret rose, if I smell rose. And sometimes smoke, sometimes leathery smells, and sometimes different incense. And for me, when I smell incense, I know it's my ancestors speaking with me, because that's one tool I use to make connection with my ancestors. So everything I'm listing, none of them are universal. And I wouldn't say that these are what other people who experience psychic smelling also experience. This is just how I've coded the meaning over the years.
So I love that. That's a perfect transition, because what I wanted to ask about is, as this gift developed, and as you started paying attention to it, you said when this scent shows up and it smells like a certain person, I need to ask, is this actually about that person, or is it the energy of that person as it relates to somebody else or some other situation? So Have you found in your development of your intuitive gifts that that process of having internal inquiry or internal dialogue where you're intentionally asking the intuitive sense, what are you here to tell me? What are you here to show me? Do you feel like that's an important part of developing these intuitive gifts?
Absolutely. For me, I'm not the type of, and I know that there are mystics out there that would disagree, and that's totally cool. But for me, I feel because I'm here as a human, all the things that are available to me as a human are gifts, not just my psychic gifts, which means it is important to use my rational mind too. I can't just trust only my intuition. I need to use my logic. I need to use, like a rational mind, and being able to combine it is really important. So for me, I like to use the word discernment a lot, like being critical of the information that comes in and thinking it through and feeling it through. And that's how I come to that final feeling, that final answer, so to speak. Because it's a huge disservice and potentially dangerous to only lean in on one gift when I have more than one. And and when we all have more than one, we all have logic, we all have common sense. I think it's a good thing to weigh things with some pragmatism, and to weigh things with a dash of humor, and to weigh things in the context of, I'm like, we can't be so self-absorbed that we think that we're only ones that are picking up information. Like it's important to look at it from a bigger picture perspective.
So you mentioned that, especially when you were younger, that there was resistance, is the word I'll go with, resistance around embracing the messages that you were receiving. And over the last 2 years, I've been experiencing awakenings, and it's plural, right? Because it's not a singular experience. It's also not a linear experience. It's like this spiral experience of emergence, right? Awakening and emergence and healing, and they all intersect. I'm curious, in this journey of multiple awakenings that I are related to the sacred feminine, but as I deepen into the work that I'm doing, they're also very much agendered when you get to the kind of higher levels of what's happening. But the word witch is incredibly loaded, right? Because we have thousands of years of oppression and what I'll call femicide, the murdering of particularly women who have any knowledge or gifts around herbalism or midwifery or healing or intuitive gifting, like psychic abilities. So we're carrying a lot of like ancestral epigenetic trauma around it being unsafe to self-identify as an intuitive, as a witch, as a psychic, whatever word you want to use. How did you work through that process? And was it for you, do you feel like most of your resistance was internal, or were there also people in your life who you felt like were judgmental of or not willing to accept this new aspect of your being or emerging aspect of your being?
That's such a big question for me in particular. So yeah, it was definitely both internal and external. A little bit of background information. My mom is like a very devoted, born again evangelical Christian. And my dad's an atheist who I think he reveres science just as much as, my mother reveres Jesus. And so it was just the kind of home that I grew up in. And I learned I had to hide things from both sides, right? Because they both have their own biases. And then my husband, I met him actually when I was attending church. And so even though he's not a Christian now, when we met, we both were attending church, and his parents are also very, very committed born again evangelical Christians. So from the familial, the external, there's definitely judgments and pressures for us to conform or to fit in the box in a way that did not threaten even their to a certain degree, even sort of how they look within the church community. And then for me, I think there was a lot of there's the multi-generational witch wound, and then also because I was indoctrinated in evangelical Christianity, where and not to say that all churches feel this way, but it was the one that I attended where they really only deemed certain paranormal gifts as of God or of the Holy Spirit, and anything outside of that was deemed as like you're really playing on the devil's playground. I could relate with plants and I can smell things. That was not one of them. Like those two things were not one of those things. And so for me, answering that other part of your question of like, how did I unpack? How did I, cross over and, joined the dark side or whatever you want to call it? I actually was really getting a lot of invitations from a particular archetype. Well, she's technically a character in the Old Testament of the Bible, but I really relate with her as an archetype. And this character's name, Jezebel.
Oh, okay, cool.
So like she's like the bad girl, right? She's the very, very, she's the baddest of the bad girls in the Old Testament. And she was actually a historical figure. She was a princess, and she was married into the Hebrew kingdom for a political convenience, and she was assassinated later. Essentially, that's kind of like the short version. And she was assassinated because she, was very active in goddess worship, and she was very active in menstrual mysteries, and all these things that I learned were very important in my own awakening. And so I just started relating with her. She started showing up in my dreams. I would start hearing her, and she would show up in journeys, and it was just this terrifying figure, because in the beginning, I was still sort of the good Asian churchgoer girl, and she's like, no, I don't talk to bad girls. And the more I spoke with her, the more I realized that, wow, like there's a lot of similarities, a lot. And I realized finally, like she was probably at the time one of the only ones that could see me for who I really was and accept me fully. And realized also that every time I spoke with her, I felt more and more relief. I didn't have to hide, I didn't have to pretend anymore, and I didn't have to sort of force the square peg in a round hole or whatever. I wouldn't really consider myself square, but yeah, just I just didn't feel like I had to be on this vigilance to be a certain way on the outside. So yeah, I would say speaking with her, which really is shadow work, right? It's being able to confront your nightmares, confront your fears, and start really dancing with the devil, essentially. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I find so much to identify with in that story. And I think probably a lot of people listening do too, whether you're still in the church, whether you have that relationship with the Christ through Jesus and through the Western Judeo-Christian perspective or not, whether you're, maybe just identifying with this idea of an aspect of shadow self who's showing up for you again and again. And we have to kind of make this decision. Do I form a relationship with this aspect of myself, or do I continue to shun and hide this aspect of myself? And personally, and a lot of the listeners know, like, this is very much similar to what I went through too. I came into a relationship with Jesus in my early 20s. I kind of grew up going to church some with my mom. My dad was an atheist. That then eventually created conflict. So we stopped going to church because dad didn't want to go, sister didn't want to go. So mom and I stopped going. became a born again Christian at 21 when I was also being a sugar baby. So kind of like borderline prostitution, but then also like showing up in church, and I was living like this dual life. And as I tried to be a good Christian, because I truly had so many powerful, miraculous encounters and experiences of the divine through God the Father, through Jesus, and through the Holy Spirit, all of which are, framed as being masculine in Christianity, which is really only, it's incomplete.
Right.
But then as the divine feminine kept coming and kind of knocking at the door, she's knocking at the door with this call of like, hey, hello, you're a priestess. You need to come and, consort with me. We've got work to do together in helping women heal their wombs. And I'm like, I can't fuck with you. Like, like, no. I gotta stay over here. And also being in the church and really craving the approved spiritual gifts that you mentioned, right? Being like, okay, well, and witnessing them at times, like, I've seen people slain in the spirit,
or speaking in tongues, right? Like all those ones. Yeah.
Prayer language, but I was never given a tongue like in church. And I would go to these, conferences or different,
revivals,
very charismatic churches. Yeah. And there was this really interesting experience of like, that created a wound or activated an old wound of spiritual inferiority, where it was like, okay, this person is, giving a prophetic word, or this person's speaking in a tongue, or this person's laying on hands, and they have these gifts, but I don't find these gifts in myself. And therefore I could only draw 3 meanings from that. 1 was they're crazy. 2 was they're lying. And 3 was I'm not good enough. And I mostly landed on 3, right?
Yeah.
I was like, I believe this is real. Yeah. I just believe that I'm not good enough, or it's not happening for me. And I prayed for it. I was like, God, please baptize me with the Holy Spirit. Give me all the gifts. I want them all,
That was me too. Totally me.
Well, and here's the beautiful thing. Our prayers were very much answered, right? It's just like, here's your gifts. Like, you got them, you know what I mean? Go out and use them. And it's like, wait, those aren't the ones, those are not on the list. You know what I mean? But what's so incredible is that the more, in my experience anyway, the more that I do that shadow work and open to the gifts that are present. And for me, the strongest is clairsentience. And then it's connected to a verbal, like a verbal channel. So I'll be speaking and then the full body chills come, and then I'm like continuing to speak, but what's coming through is not, it's filtered through me, but it's not of me necessarily. Like, it's like, and I'll tell people, I'm like, God, this is God talking. It's not me talking. So you just, but also you could throw it out the window if you don't like it. You know what I mean? So, this process of healing the witch wound, and even as we say that word, sometimes it gets stuck in the throat, you know what I mean? And that's because of that oppression. But were there any practical, tools or boundary scripts, or just ways that you were able to embrace it? Like, how were you able to have those conversations with your parents, or did you? Was it still just kind of like, you're doing this, they quietly disapprove, and we don't talk about it? Or did you ever kind of come out in your gifting and say, this is who I am, this is the way that I relate to the divine, I love you, I hope you can honor it, and if you can't, I'm doing it anyway? Like, did you come out, or is it just kind of like you just kept moving towards your own path and they can accept it or deny it?
Yeah, I would say it was both. It wasn't because my coming out wasn't like this one specific line in the timeline that said, this is like before and after. It was gradual. It was gradual in the sense that I would go on journeys, but then I would like hide my rattle, right? And then after, it's like, okay, I'll leave my rattle out. And so for me, for instance, going back to, it relates to this topic, but going back to how do I make sure that the psychic smells that I'm experiencing are how I need to be interpreting them? Is it like interpreting in a way that's like honoring and accurate? So I taught myself how to work with the tarot, and also to work with the I Ching, which is like the Chinese oracle system. And for me, it's like if both point to yes or both point to no, then that's something I can actually act on. But if there's incongruence, then that means I probably have to wait and just keep on paying attention, right? So for me, it was like in the beginning, it was like I would hide all those things, and I'd hide my altars. And if my parents are coming over for dinner, I would just make sure that like my bedroom door is closed and all those things. I wouldn't light incense if they were around, because in Taiwanese culture, incense is still really understood as being very connected to ancestral, because that's, you typically go, visit a temple and light incense and burn what look like they're like fake bills, but it's the custom is when you do that, you're passing abundance to that other world for your ancestors to be able to experience some earthly blessings. But so a lot of those things I still had to hide. But then over the years, I've just been more and more comfortable in my own truth, where I just, I don't do those things anymore. I don't put away my altar. I don't put away my rattle. I still light my incense. And I got to a point one day, my mom came over and I was helping my younger one get dressed, because they were going to go out for the day. And as I was doing that, she was doing a witch hunt in my house. She was like going through the house, identifying every, thing that she deemed like satanic. And she just sort of came out, didn't even want to touch it, because, that was already like so forbidden for her. And she said, well, I saw these things like proving like that, I'm a witch. And she's just like, what's going on? And I said, Mom, I don't relate to the cosmos the way you do. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but it doesn't mean that I'm wrong either. And when I said that, she's just like, but do you still believe in Jesus? Like, it was just something that she really needed to know. She's like, I need to know I'm going to see you again. And I was like, well, I actually don't know if you're going to see me again, but I can guarantee you can see me now. So let's just appreciate each other now. And after, whoever passes first, I hope that you come visit, or I visit you through the winds or through whatever. But we don't really know, even though I really do believe reincarnation is a thing, but that's just a belief. And it seems really real because I do a lot of past lives work, and I do a lot of soul retrievals. But it's not like empirically proven, right? Like, and even though I think it's so real, I really do. And just like she really believes that, Saint Peter and whatever other angels outside guarding the gates of, of heaven. And unless you have accepted Christ as your savior, you're not entering in. And that's really, really healthily, like, it's so dear to her. And so I just said that there's so many different ways to experience the wonder of creation. We both agree it's created. We both agree that this universe is so intelligent. Our bodies are so intelligent that it's not just some freaking accident. But it may not be the same way that I live. And, it's taken some time to mend it. And what's interesting, after I said that, my dad said that he was a closet witch for many years, and he used to practice tarot too, which is so crazy to hear. And he's still he doesn't really practice those with specific tools, but he's actually quite intuitive, which is something that he even said that it was not something that he felt comfortable in. Probably because in many cultures, intuitives are still sort of seen as the crone, right? It's still a very female experience rather than a male experience. And so I think that was something that he had to really, wrestle with and be comfortable with.
Thank you so much for being willing to share that personal story. I think it's really helpful for people who are going through their own process of emergence to just know that, one, there's not like a right or wrong way to do it. Two, like you said, it doesn't have to be all of a sudden like, okay, I'm coming out of the closet. And I would say that process of emergence is I'm mainly curious because I feel like I'm in it. I feel like I've been in it for about the last year and a half, but I'm just really, I mean, today with this new moon, I changed my Instagram handle from Stoked Yogi to Amelia Travis, which is my name. And part of that is that I'm really moving into this work of the medicine woman and like helping women with womb healing and doing that through the use of certain sacred tools and sacred allies. And it's like, you know, I need the reassurance. And it's like, I thankfully have the full support of my husband. I have the full support of my mom, who's my remaining living parent. But there's been a lot of spiritual oppression in my past, where there was people that I put on a pedestal or put in a position of put in a power dynamic above me, who I was desperately seeking their approval, and this is so far outside of it, right? And so I find that there's still a little voice that, never mind the like, again, just like there were in my walk as a self-identified Christian, now in my walk as a self-identified priestess, there's incredible miraculous experiences, incredible healings, incredible knowing prayer. You know, I can see the way my prayer is being woven constantly. So I have all this evidence that I am supported by my relationship with divinity in what's currently expressing itself. And yet there's still the little voice that shows up every once in a while. It's like, but are you sure this isn't bad? You know? And I was sitting in ayahuasca ceremony and this recently, and what I opened to, or what was open to me, was that labeling, right? The binary of right, wrong, good, bad. And how there's always been in me this very deep curiosity towards, for the occult, right? And when I say occult, I mean that which is hidden. I mean that which is in the dark, the mystery, which is very much related to the feminine, right? We have that yin principle. We have the, you know, the earth, the matter, right? And we put so much emphasis, and I say we, meaning the collective kind of spiritual, even new age communities, on ascendance and ascending energy and transcendence. And it's like, what about immanence? What about going down and in? What about, you know, our connection to this plane, which is this plane and this body, which are the instruments through which we can awaken, right? So we're constantly going like, hello, out here. I'm like waving my arms around in the air. You guys are reaching up for the sky. Like we're looking for like the answers out here, out here, out here, out here. But when we go down and in, there's so much there. That's where everything, in my opinion, maybe not everything, but that's where our knowing and understanding can actually arise from. So, so you have the psychic smelling gift. And what are some of the other ways that you currently work or practice or experience your relationship with divinity? Obviously we touched very lightly on plants, and, you know, you mentioned shamanic journeying and dreams. Can you just share with us a little bit about like, what does your spiritual practice look like today?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit of all those things that you've listed. I feel that the psychic smelling, it's because I can't control it. Like I have no way of knowing when I'm going to experience it. It's a little different than some intuitives who always have this, like that line is always open and they could just ask their guides and get the download. It's not like that with psychic smelling. Psychic smelling it happens when it happens. And oftentimes it happens when I need it. And when I think I need it and when spirit thinks I need it, it's not always the same. So sometimes that can be frustrating. But in terms of practice where I can be more proactive, where I can do the doing and the being, I sit down with tea every day, and I speak with tea as a teacher, and sometimes it'll just be me and T, and sometimes it'll be me and T and a few other spirits that are, I mean, they're not physically in the room, or at least your eyes can't see it, but I know they're there. And that's more my personal practice. That's not really like professional, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I journey for myself. And I also, of course, journey for others, you know, for clients and so forth.
Can you share a little bit about what that means for anybody who doesn't know the term?
Yeah. So let me back up a bit. So what is exactly shamanism, in case, right? If we need to sort of kind of just start from the foundations. So shamanism is a practice of relating to entities from the spirit world, and relating to things of the earth that are non-human, but relating with them in such a way where you are in communication and receiving information as if they were human, in a sense, not human in form, but human as an intelligence. And realizing that all plants and all animals carry their own form of intelligence. And in the work, it's called medicine. You know, there's, you know, bird medicine or plant medicine and whatnot. And so for a journey, I enter into a trance. Now, there's different ways to enter into a trance. One very, well-known way that's quite popular right now is through, entheogen plants, right? So like plants that alter your mind, alter your brain waves, and you enter into a trance that way. I do not work professionally that way. Of course, in my private practice, I do find it really beneficial to work with, let's say, mushrooms and so forth. But anyway, in my professional practice, I enter into trance through drumming and rattling. And when I enter into that trance, I get access to the spirit worlds, where I, on a spirit level, travel, and then I land there and I meet with my various allies, and I meet with clients' allies, and I can ask questions. I can get insights into future potentials. I can get answers about why a situation has transpired the way it has and what can be done about it. I can meet with their ancestors, and oftentimes can bring healing within that family line. I can have a look at their past lives, and if there's like lost soul parts, I can retrieve it back. Lots of different things. And I'm only really glossing over it like on a quite superficial level. But going back to my practice, it's like just going to visit them and chit-chatting. And sometimes it's like, I go because I've got stuff and I need help. Just like we all, as humans have stuff. It's what life is sometimes. And sometimes it's just, to get inspired, or just to hang out with them and just to be in their presence and to learn. And yeah, so that definitely takes up a good portion of my practice. And then I would say another big component is really divinating outside of that realm, and being, once again, in this three-dimensional world. We're working a fair amount with the I Ching. I love both. I love tarot. I love the I Ching. I love I Ching specifically because because I am also Chinese. So there is that tie, this ancient tie to this ancient language that I happen to still speak. And there's a lot of hidden meaning in things that can't be translated from Chinese into English that I just really naturally understand. And so it's like, it's a different language, but then there's like this other language within the language that I really relate well with. And it's a fascinating oracle system. It's so accurate, just like tarot, but it's accurate in a different way for me. It just really gets to the core of the matter. And you're not doing a spread, right? You're not doing like a Celtic cross or some type of like decision tree. It's you draw one hexagram, and sometimes it might change into a second hexagram, but at the end it's just two images, and that's it. But yet there's so much information and so much nuance, and I don't even think anyone could ever really be a master of it, because it's so packed, it's so rich with wisdom. It's just so alive.
And as you embraced these different tools and practices, did you find teachers or people to study with? Did you read books? Were you self-taught in an intuitive way? And I'm asking this because I believe that there's value in both, right? I believe there's value in sitting at the feet of elders. I believe there's value in going and receiving trainings, not necessarily that you need to have a certification in something, but like going and receiving knowledge and wisdom from people who have been in this study for longer than you, right? We're always the student and the teacher. Then I think there's also, especially when it comes to our spiritual practices, I think it's incredibly important to cultivate agency and autonomy by self-study, by teaching yourself, by learning from books and from your own experience and your own intuition, right? And just like, to use tarot as an example, my mom started teaching me how to read tarot when I was like 9 or 10 years old. I grew up playing with it, I would say. Like, it was like, I would, and we had books and things like that, and I could learn. And over the years, I also learned to like pull the card and not use the book, right? Look at it and look at the images and allow my subconscious to meet my conscious mind and to tell a story. And from that personal storytelling, I started to build relationship with the cards as my own practice, rather than saying, well, this book says this and this book says this. And obviously those are archetypal. So did you have teachers and trainings? Did you do it all yourself, or was it somewhere in the middle?
It was definitely somewhere in the middle. It was both. So I'll share a little bit about that accident, that I called it, that accidental entrance into shamanism. So I was on bed rest. It was a 5-month bed rest. It was a little over 5 months actually, and it was a really long time to be in bed, like all day, every day. And I had committed at that time to get back into my meditation practice. And so, it started off as like a 10-minute practice, which kind of led to it growing eventually to about 5 hours a day. And it was around, I can't remember, it must have been around, the time when I was meditating extensively, at least around 4 hours or so, where one day I found myself in this place, like this spirit world that I knew was real. And I talked to spirits. They said some things about me and about, some things like in my life, and about some people, like close people in my life. And it was just so real that I couldn't deny it. So that was my first shamanic journey. And after that, like, I didn't know how to get back. Like I would get excited to go into meditation every day, after the kids were picked up and sent to school and so forth. Sorry, not kids. At the time, there was only one child. I was bearing the other one, but anyway, yeah. So, I just couldn't. I just didn't know how. And that's when I realized, okay, I got there, but I'm not trying to get back there, because I have so many more questions now, and I want to explore. And that was when, after my second was born, I started asking around, and I shared this with some, close friends that I knew it was like safe to share with them, that it wasn't going to feel like I was, like I wouldn't be judged for it, and they wouldn't sort of dismiss me as like crazy, so to speak. Because at that time I was still really unpacking my ability to perceive myself as a very legitimate and credible person, even though I was having all those experiences. And so that was when I was introduced to another female shamanic practitioner. She doesn't live in Vancouver proper. She lives like on Vancouver Island, but she came to my home, and she taught me. Her name is Leona Delangboom. I'm not actually sure if she's still currently practicing shamanic healing. I know she took some time to do some traveling and so forth, but anyway, that's her name, Leona Delangboom. And she really taught me the language and the safety pieces, because that was something that I didn't know. But in terms of the perception and being able to befriend allies, that was something that I like, it really just came with I think there was a natural gifting towards it, and then also it just came with practice. And then in terms of tarot and the I Ching, those are self-taught. And things like chaos magic, that's something that I also practice. Not so much, it's not really something that it's more like the supporting structure kind of in the background where you don't really see it. It's what holds my intentions, and it's what holds spaces for the business and so forth. But that, the more I learn about the craft of chaos magic, the more I realized I was doing things as a child and I didn't even know it was witchcraft. Like I was writing sigils, especially in the context of chaos magic, like a very specific method. I was doing that just as a child. Like I did that on like my notebooks and like my binders growing up through grade school. And I didn't know that's what it was. It was so interesting to just find that out way later. And so I do believe some things are just you're born with a gifting, or you're born with a disposition to learn it quickly. And then other times I think there's a lot of merit in learning from masters. But I agree with you. When you learn from masters, it's not for the context, it's not, for self-approval, right? It's to grow in confidence and to deepen your work. And this is why that personal agency is so important. And for me, my personal experience of being really lost in the church, because I mean, any autonomy and any ability to think for myself was stripped away, right? Like it was all about the leaders of the church, the churches that I attended. It was always about the clergy. And like you had said, because I didn't have the gifts of laying hands, I didn't have the gift of prophesying, I didn't have the gift of speaking in tongues, I really did experience that status, right? Like that there's like that social spiritual hierarchy that exists. And so I was really told that I must listen, I must obey, and like I must not think for myself, because that's like, once again, the devil's playground if I think too much for myself. And yeah, so I mean, for me, it was an act of healing to also learn on my own.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And it's so interesting, Mimi, when you're talking about not knowing that as a child that there were ways that you were practicing witchcraft, specifically the sigils. Same thing. Like I remember writing in my notebooks, and I would layer the letters over each other.
Totally.
Because I didn't want someone to read it and know what it meant. But it would be specifically like often affirmation type statements, like or like things that I wanted. And so you literally just illuminated that for me. And so chaos magic, you guys, I had to go look that up this morning because I didn't know what it was. And you can, Mimi, feel free to chime in and correct me if this is not totally accurate, but it's essentially a system of magic. It's not even really a system. It's like that your beliefs are kind of the primary governing agent of that type of magic. So it's really like what you believe you can create, or it's how your personal belief system actually, as you said, creates the container for your magic, whatever it is. And it's interesting because as I was reading a little bit about the history of it, it's kind of a postmodern, it says, approach to magic, and which I loved, because as a literature nerd, I'm like, oh, okay, that helps me get it, right? Like it was almost a response to these systems of high magic, right? That were really ritual and formalized and say, you have to do things this way. And this was kind of the pendulum swinging the other direction and saying, there's also our ability to just create magic through our own expression, which to me has a strong correlation with like quantum physics, in the sense that it's kind of like we're forming and shaping what's unfolding by what we pay attention to, right? And so I would love to, is that how you understand chaos magic? Or when you say that term, what does that mean to you?
Yes, absolutely. Everything you described is accurate to how I interpret chaos magic as well. One other piece that I really love about chaos magic is that it is totally non-denominational, right? You don't need to be Wiccan. And that was something that I was interested in, because like, I mean, if you go to your local metaphysical bookstore in North America, chances are the witchcraft section is going to be very Wiccan based, right? It's because it's representative of a huge majority of the demographic of North America. And if you want anything more earth and ancestral based, then you wind up veering into or First Nations or you know, like Aboriginal cultures. But then that really is now touching more on shamanic work. And so for me, I felt, yeah, like and not to say that shamanism is only for North America, because shamanism is found all over the world. It's the oldest form of, if you even want to call it a religion, but it is the oldest form of spirituality found on earth, and it exists in all cultures, because humans have always been interested in their relationship with the earth, with everything that grows on the earth, everything that flies above the earth, and also with the elements, right? With water, with fire, with, you know, with air, all these things. And for me, I practice core shamanism. So it's not specific to a specific region or a specific group. Now answering chaos magic. So for me, because I was born in Taipei. I moved here when I was 2. I spoke Mandarin at home. I had a really traditional, Chinese Taiwanese upbringing, where we ate the food and, observed all the lunar holidays, and, ate special lunar food around those holidays, and, had a lot of customs around it. Yet, I would say that I'm in many ways more westernized than I am Asian in other, right? Just because like this is my community. And when you move to a place when you're 2, and I've never, I've never attended school in Asia. So a lot of my values have been, or at least my worldview has been taught through the Western European model of education that of course came over here to North America. So in some ways, I feel like I'm not of either of the worlds, and I'm of both worlds. And so this was something that I really, it continues to be a big theme in my own life. Like, where's home? Who am I? What's the most authentic expression of me? And so for chaos magic, that's why I'm so, it resonates with me. It never made sense for me to identify too much with Wiccan practices, because it didn't seem totally authentic. But chaos magic, because it's non-denominational, it made so much sense. And the more I researched and the more I practiced, the more I realized, oh my gosh, I've been practicing this stuff anyway. And so, yeah, and then so that's one piece that I wanted to add to the chaos magic. And then the other piece is it's actually eventually, they say that when you get to the degree of mastery where you don't need anything, you don't need candles, you don't need wands, you don't need paper, you don't need sigils, you don't need any of it, because at that point of mastery, all you're manipulating or working with is energy. And so that to me is also very quantum. Right. And it also is just so exciting. Like, it's like, wow, I get to be Magneto or whatever. I mean, right. Like, it's like when I like watch because my kids like superhero kind of sagas, so to speak. I'm like, that's interesting. Like, I wonder if the writers have a deep fascination with chaos magic and the quantum, because they certainly reference it a lot.
It's so interesting. Like, I think one thing that's really cool about that perspective, and I was experiencing this the other night, I was holding a ceremony, a mushroom ceremony, and I was working with other people's energy, right? So what I'm learning about the way that I work is that it is, again, it's this emergence, right? There's something that, rather than being like, how do I do this and what are the systems? And even though those may exist and other people and teachers may have them, though, there's a few ways that I work. And one is song and sound. So like tonal vibrations, moving other people's energy that they are not necessarily consciously able to move, helping them move it and release it through tonal vibrations and through improvised song. And then dance is another one that's coming to me all the time as a form of prayer and a form of magic, but one in which I can move my body, and by moving my body, holding a clear intention, like I can move energy. So to me, I'm fascinated to learn more about what chaos magic means to different people. And I think this is a good transition point. We love to share a book club on the show, and you've talked a couple times about going to the Metaphysical bookstore and being frustrated with not finding what you need. But I would love to know, were there one or two books that you're like, this book was really powerful in giving me more permission or freedom to be who I am, or this one was really powerful for my relationship with shamanism or chaos magic, or we touched on dreamings and didn't really get to dive into that. We'll have to have you back to talk about dreams, because I'm so fascinated. But any books that you would recommend for our listeners?
I did get this book at the Metaphysical bookstore, but the one that I like to frequent has a pretty big psychology and relationship section. So it's not like, it's not an occult book, but it certainly has been really instrumental in my own healing. And it's called How to Be an Adult. It's written by David Richo. Richo is spelled Richo. And it's a small book. It's a fairly accessible read, and it is just so powerful. I recommend it to anyone. And I would say for me, it's helped me the most simply because it helped me really understand who I am in relationship to the environment. That can be the human environment, that can be, the environment of energy. What is it that I really want? How can I be clear about how I feel? And how can I be clear about that with others? And realizing boundaries. Like these are, and it's an old book. It's been around for a while, and David Richo has written many different books. Like and I would recommend all his books, but that one in particular is definitely a worthwhile read. And for your listeners, it's common enough where you could find it at your local library.
How to Be an Adult by David Richo. We'll link it in the show notes below to Amazon. You guys can find it. And if you want to buy it in your local bookstore, good. Go support, shop local.
Yes.
Okay, so I know that there's people listening who are fascinated, myself included. I'm going to be booking a past life healing and soul retrieval, because that's literally something I've been looking for. And here you are. Ta-da! So, but I want to share, if you guys are fascinated with this, if you found yourself in her words and you're looking to delve more deeply into this work, Mimi offers a couple things that are incredibly valuable for you that you can check out on her website, which is shopceremonie.com, and Ceremonie is spelled with an IE at the end. That's also linked in the show notes below. You can also connect with her on Instagram at shopceremonie, and it's shop and then CEREMONIE. That's also linked in the show notes below. And on those sites and her Instagram, you'll find access to the remote shamanic readings, where she's going to travel to the spirit realms on your behalf, like she talked about, to discover spirit allies, receives answers to any questions that you may have, and facilitate energetic rebalancing. And then you have some courses that are coming up. So if you guys were intrigued by the past life healing and soul retrieval, on April 7th, you're going to have an online course. Is that a webinar, or is that, looks like it's a webinar, like a live masterclass? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So that's coming up in April. In May, she'll be teaching on psychic smelling. And then in June, a 4-hour intensive called Devil Medicine, Shadows, Nightmares, and the Dark Goddess. So if you're doing this shadow work, or if you're interested in diving into that aspect of self, I hope that you can feel, and that you received from this conversation, that she's a safe person to do that with. I feel that for myself, and maybe you feel that for yourself as well. And so if you want to find information about any of those, all of those are on shopceremonie.com. So go check those out. Go say hi to her on Instagram, send her a DM. And then if you're interested in exploring more about neurofeedback, we didn't talk a lot about that, but you can find her Instagram about neurofeedback at Open Minds Performance, and info on the web at openmindsperformance.com. And all of that is linked in the show notes. So if you're looking for more info, go down there, scroll down, go connect, say hello. And then let's leave them with a little bit of wisdom from you. You've given us so much, but can you just share with us one or two pieces of encouragement or direction for those who are seeking to go deeper in healing their own witch wound, embracing their own shamanic practitioner potential, or just really finding more freedom in their unique spiritual walk? What would you tell them?
Love that question. Wow. I would say choose something simple and repeatable to do on a daily basis. So something as simple as, if you're wanting to deepen your shamanic connection, and simultaneously heal your witch wound, something as simple as sitting down with a herb or tea even on a daily basis and just enter into meditation. And if you do it enough, and with the intention of, I'd like to speak with so-and-so, if you're having, if you're consuming, let's say, peppermint tea, or if you're consuming some oolong tea, say, have the intention, hi, my name is Amelia. I'd like to develop a relationship with you, T, and just start doing that. Do it for a month. And see, and it doesn't have to be long. You can keep it like 5 to 10 minutes, right? And you're quiet. You're not on your phone. You're not thinking about what you have to do next. You're literally just sitting down with a plant teacher and just start being receptive. If you do that for a month, you could actually definitely increase your shamanic connection. B, you may actually wind up learning a thing or two from the plant teacher. And C, you'll realize healing the witch wound, it starts with understanding that plants are not objects. Plants are real individuals. And it's not about, oh, I'm unwell and so I'm going to drink this and get better. It's actually about having a relationship, because how come some people work, like oil of oregano works really well for some people and not for others? There's many different reasons. Of course, there's, the physiological reason, but my belief is also that if that person is relating to that medicine in a way that is like honest and not transactional, not like, I bought you for $12.99 at the store, so therefore you're going to make me feel better. That is transactional. Obviously. So, but it's more like, hey, like I'm wanting to get better by being more natural and not relying on, toxins and so forth to make me better. And I'm willing to give it a try and willing to be receptive to what you can offer me. And that is really the start to the practice. I haven't met a witch that says that she does or he does not, or they do not have a relationship with earth. They all do.
Thank you so much for your wisdom. This was such a joy, and I look forward to following along more closely with what is unfolding for you over the next year, and to learning from you and with you. And I thank you for listening to whatever prompt of spirit made you arrive right on time in my world. And I can't wait for my soul retrieval and past life healing. So I got to go get that booked. So we got to go. But you guys, thanks for taking the time to hang out with us. And we will see you on the next episode. Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you, Amelia. And bye, everyone. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me on another episode of Totally Stoked Podcast.
If you love this episode, if it impacted you in some way, please grab a screenshot and share it right now to Instagram stories. Tag Stoked Yogi, hashtag Totally Stoked Podcast. Each week, we'll grab one listener who shared and send you some Stoked Yogi swag. Also, if you love the show, please subscribe, share it with a friend, or head over to iTunes right now and leave us an honest review. Your support and feedback make this show possible. If you have ideas about how we can improve, please send them to podcast@stokedyogi.com. Until next time, you guys, keep showing up, loving people, telling the truth, and remember, keep living your life totally stoked.